Welcome to the Moss Adams presentation, How to Correctly Assess and Improve Your Enterprise System. Before we get started, we have just a few items that will truly improve your participation in today's session. So we want this webcast to be interactive for you. If you have questions, please use the Q&A widget by typing in your question and pressing the Submit button. Additionally, you can access today's presentation material and related content in the slide deck and handouts widget. Due to its abbreviated nature, this session is not eligible for continuing professional education credit. If you have trouble with either the audio or visual portion of today's session, please press F5 to refresh your browser. And finally, the material appearing in this presentation is for informational purposes only and should not be construed as advice of any kind, nor is information intended to create, and receipt does not constitute a legal relationship. If you require advice, please contact your Moss Adams professional for assistance related to your specific needs. When your enterprise system isn't meeting your expectations, you might assume that it's time to replace the system, which is precisely why we've asked Labi Rabiu, Managing Director of Moss Adams Enterprise Systems Consulting Practice, who has practiced in strategy, selection, and implementation of enterprise systems since 1997, to share his insights after many years' experience and many, many system assessments. Labi, welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you, Tanya, and welcome everyone to this webcast. At the end of today's presentation, you should be able to describe the steps in the ERP assessment process. You should be able to discuss typical ERP system challenges that may lead to an assessment and describe the solution options for an ERP system challenge and key consideration for each option. We'll start with a quick overview of our recommended approach for assessing enterprise systems. It's a tried and tested methodology we have used over several years on our assessment engagements. Then we'll turn our focus to the typical ERP system challenges faced by organizations, sharing some real-life examples. And finally, we'll explore the type of solution options we have seen companies deploy to address their system challenges and why one option may be preferable to another. So companies rely on enterprise systems to integrate and automate their business processes. In addition, these systems are supposed to provide several benefits, including automating the flow of information within the company and with its business partners, like customers and vendors. They're supposed to provide reporting data for management to mine and make decisions on. And they're supposed to enable compliance with relevant internal and regulatory controls so that an organization's exposure to risk is limited. But oftentimes, a system is implemented and still fails to meet one or more of these objectives. The processes are still manual, reporting may be cumbersome or just plain non-existent, or the system may be lacking necessary controls or vital features needed to run the business. And here I'm talking about any type of enterprise system, be it your accounting or ERP system, or related customer relationship management, CRM, or HR system, or even your financial planning system. Although our main focus for today will be on your accounting ERP system in particular. So what do you do when you have system challenges? When you're not getting the right kind of return on your investment in your ERP system? It may be time to undertake an assessment of the system. The assessment approach I would recommend can, broadly speaking, be broken down into 4 different phases, all of which are anchored on strong project management and change enablement. The phases for a good assessment exercise starts with fact-finding, then followed by gap analysis and research, and continues with recommendation and planning, and if required, a system selection phase. The system selection phase is usually a separate process by itself, but can be included as part of an overall assessment and selection project. Let's briefly discuss each of these phases, starting with the foundation. Project management and change enablement is the foundation of a good assessment process. Once you've decided to embark on an assessment, first you want to establish the project governance. And by that, I mean the project steering committee and the project core team. The core team should include the key process owners you need to interface with in assessing the problem, and also the vendor solution consultant who would help drive the potential solutions. Then you conduct a kickoff and start coordinating with the project team members. And one of the first items on your agenda for that kickoff should be to clearly agree on the scope of the assessment project. What are the system issues you're trying to resolve? What are the goals? Then you develop your project plan and schedule your fact-finding sessions with key individuals. And from then on, you want to manage the project and communicate goals and progress. The key to the success of any assessment project is communication. In our experience, however challenging an existing system may be, once folks are invested in it, they sometimes resist changes to processes and routines that may be the outcome of an assessment. So the key is to communicate the need for change and potential benefits of making the change, and then get them invested in the process. So having established the foundation, you can then move on to the first phase of an assessment project, and that is the fact-finding phase. The goal of the fact-finding phase is to gather more information on the system issues and understand the main challenges and requirements. It usually starts with a review of available process and system documentation. Then you interview the process owners and key stakeholders who can shed more light on the challenges and pain points. Then you follow that by conducting a walkthrough of the system, looking at the underlying technology. Often by doing that, you might uncover a fundamental weakness in the technology underpinning the system. For example, a system written on an older code base that's no longer in wide use and that's nearing the end of its support lifecycle may not hold much promise for improvement, because you can be rest assured it is no longer receiving much R&D investment from the vendor. Next, you want to evaluate the system functionality in detail to understand the breakpoints. If a system is lacking in critical functionality, is it an inherent defect in the system, or simply because you have outgrown it? Finally, conclude the fact-finding phase by reviewing your findings with the project team and then prioritize the most critical issues that need to be resolved. Following the fact-finding, you want to move on to gap analysis and research phase. The goal for this phase is to document all the requirements gathered in the previous phase. And the goal includes assessing and defining the system functionality gaps, assessing and defining the technical gaps, and then conducting research and analysis in order to identify potential solutions and integration points. And I should say this phase requires working closely with the ERP vendor consultant or an industry solution expert familiar with your unique industry requirements who can design solution options. You should first explore the solution options available in your vendor space, but you should weigh this carefully against the overall fit of the system to your needs. Once you're done with the gap analysis and research, you're ready to move on to the final phase of the assessment. And that is the recommendation and planning phase. The objective for this phase is to document the solution recommendations after weighing all alternatives, and also to lay out a roadmap plan for implementing the solution. You should start by summarizing the findings and observations from your research and analysis. Then define the alternative solutions you found to address the business application gaps. If the system is not user-friendly, is it missing a feature or has reporting or control gaps? What are the possible solutions? You should define the alternative solutions you found for the technical platform gaps as well. For example, if the system is too slow, too difficult to customize, or the program is just too old, what are the possible solutions? Then weigh each solution option carefully and develop your recommendations. You should develop and document your recommendations and make sure that this includes an implementation roadmap plan. The plan should highlight the implementation timeline, cost estimate, as well as the risks and assumptions in the roadmap plan. Finally, the recommendation and roadmap plan should be presented to the management as a go-forward blueprint for driving the budget, the timeline, the implementation oversight, and just provide a clear path for the deployment of the recommended solution. So far we've talked about the methodology for assessment that we recommend. Let's now explore some real-life examples of ERP system challenges as we've seen from dozens of assessments. We'll discuss a few scenarios we've encountered and examine the implications for a business. And later on, we'll discuss the options for resolving recurrent ERP problems. Enterprise systems are supposed to reduce manual processes. They're supposed to allow for increased visibility across your organization and also enable improved decision making. But what if you've already implemented a system, but a business process still lacks automation? In that case, there may be a need for process-focused fit gap assessment. So consider the example of a client who did a lot of subscription billing, but whose system lacked billing automation. That meant they had to keep manual spreadsheets to track auto renewals by existing customers, and another set of manual spreadsheets to track their billing schedules. And as their customer base grew, the billing process became error-prone and too cumbersome to track, and that compelled them to assess their automation options. Or you can consider the very common example of manual payment processes that exposes companies to risks of fraud. And this is in spite of the fact that most of the modern systems out there have features supporting direct integration with banks in the form of electronic funds transfers and automatic payment approval routing. Another example of automation challenge we've seen is when a system does not enable direct collaboration with customers or suppliers, especially when dealing with businesses who require that their orders must be transmitted and acknowledged via direct electronic data interchange between their system and yours. The need to automate procurement and approval workflow is another reason why we see clients embark on system assessments. With most basic accounting systems, there is often a lack of automated purchase approval workflow that's based on a company's approval policy. And we've also seen a myriad of challenges with supply chain planning and manufacturing production processes, such as the need to automate inventory planning and forecasting to meet customer demands, or automated production scheduling. And those are just a few specific automation challenges we've seen. Reporting challenges are also a major reason to conduct a system assessment. User-friendly reporting, dashboards, KPIs, and ability to measure corporate performance are some of the hallmarks of a truly powerful ERP system. But in many of our assessments, we have seen cases where the system is not able to meet specific management reporting needs, or the system does not meet specific industry compliance reporting needs, or it's not user-friendly or intuitive, or it's not readily exportable to Excel, Word, PDF, or other third-party analysis systems. We've seen a lot of cases where the reporting output is unreliable and requires too much forensic analysis to reconcile, or the reporting just costs too much to maintain, as in a case when you need a dedicated consultant for getting reports out of the system. So if you're struggling with this type of challenges or struggling with getting consolidated financial reports or operational reports on as needed basis, then it may be time for you to conduct an evaluation of your options. We've seen a few instances where the problem is the manner a system has been set up, but in most cases, it's because of the outdated nature of the system's report engine. Internal controls and compliance are mandatory in many situations. We all know that. But failure to meet those internal controls and regulatory compliance requirements within the ERP environment can lead to fraud, fines, or both. And there are many systems that are lacking in this regard. And I'm not just talking about the basic accounting systems like QuickBooks. We've done several controls assessment projects where the control features actually do exist in the system, but the clients have not enabled the features and don't have any framework for monitoring key controls in their system. Take the example of SOX controls. One of my pre-IPO clients recently implemented a mid-tier system. They asked us to assess their system for SOX compliance. We went in there, did the assessment, and it revealed inadequate controls for system access, system security, systems change management, or other financial controls as required by SOX. They didn't have proper segregation of duties for security roles. They didn't require additional authentication beyond email and password to access the system. And they didn't enable proper notification and approval for system changes. But the good news for this client was that the system they had actually supported all of these controls, and it only had to be implemented, and they didn't need to look beyond it to meet their SOX compliance needs. Aside from SOX, there are specific regulatory and industry compliance needs that may require you to reassess your system. One example is 21 CFR Part 11, which codifies FDA requirements for electronic signature and audit trails before electronic records can be considered trustworthy. Another example is current good manufacturing practices, abbreviated as CGMP, that's enforced by FDA to ensure proper controls over manufacturing processes and facilities. And then there is the Sunshine Act, which requires companies dealing with healthcare providers to report aggregate expenditure and payments to these providers. Or maybe you need to ensure your system protects patient-sensitive information as required by HIPAA, Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. And for companies that collect customer credit card information, there may be a need to assess the system for proper controls to protect credit card data and comply with the payment card industry, PCI's, data security standard. And if you are on an older system, that may be a challenge. If you do business in the EU, I would like you to know that the General Data Protection Regulation, known as GDPR, is the most important change in data privacy regulation in 20 years. And it may impose a significant burden if your ERP vendor is not already in compliance. And the same goes for California Consumer Privacy Act, which goes into effect in January next year. And these are just a few of the typical control and compliance needs that may require system assessment, as we've seen. We've talked about some of the issues that lead companies to undertake an assessment of their system. The reality most often is that a system has a combination of some or all of these challenges, and therefore creates a need to assess it for feasibility and scalability to support all of a company's business processes. This type of assessment is called a comprehensive fit gap assessment. With a comprehensive fit gap assessment, using our own methodology, we document and prioritize the client's functional requirements. Then we assess the system's ability to meet the requirements with a specific focus on the following: the technical platform of the system setup, configurations and reporting, the controls and automation features, the vendor roadmap for future upgrades and enhancements, and integrated systems and other available solutions within the vendor ecosystem. So with this information, the client is presented with an analysis of the degree of correlation of the ERP system to their requirements without considering any extensive customization or third-party add-on. And as you would expect, this type of assessment lasts longer than the more specific assessment projects that we talked about previously. The duration of a comprehensive fit gap analysis project would depend on the type of system and the range of functional requirements being assessed. So far we have discussed our recommended methodology for assessment and gone over a few of the type of challenges that lead to an ERP system assessment. Let's now discuss the solution options for improving or resolving recurrent problems with an ERP system. When faced with the type of challenges we've discussed, I would like you to know you do have options. You can optimize, you can integrate, or you can replace. You can optimize by improving the existing system functionality, or by implementing features not previously deployed, or by upgrading to a newer version of your ERP system. You can integrate with an ISV solution, integrated software vendor solution, within the ERP vendor ecosystem. Or you can integrate with a third-party solution outside of the ERP ecosystem. And you can replace as a last resort when the ERP system no longer meets your needs, and after having considered all the available features and system upgrade and enhancement paths. And you should also have verified that there is no other cost-effective, readily integrated solution either within or outside the vendor ecosystem. And those are your options. Now, let's quickly touch on additional considerations for each one of these solution options. You should optimize when the ERP system has extensible, rich set of features or modules not previously configured. Obtaining the maximum return on ERP investment requires periodic upgrades. It requires periodic improvements to automation, to reporting and controls, and to any other features that you deem necessary for your business. But all of this should be done at a reasonable cost. So the optimization option should be weighed carefully against the cost of integrating a solution or acquiring a new system that readily meets your needs. Optimization should include business process automation. When you optimize, you should follow a best practice design and leverage the native ERP system's application and automation tools. Optimization options should be explored only if it enables improved controls, as we've discussed, and only if it meets industry compliance and other management reporting needs. Finally, you should be mindful of the optimization timeline. Optimization solutions should take days or weeks, not months. when an optimization project drags on for months, it may well be because your ERP system is not a good fit. A few considerations for the integration options. The integration option is applicable when the ERP system is lacking a module or a feature, but you can find a cost-effective solution within its partner ecosystem or from an integrated third-party vendor. This option is typically viable when there is a pre-built integration to the ERP. So by all means, you should avoid solutions that are not already integrated with the ERP, however well priced. You could end up paying a lot to build the integration yourself. You should evaluate the total cost of the integration, taking into account the license and implementation cost, the cost of the connector. And a connector, by the way, is the software application that links the data interfaces between your system and the integrated solution. So you should consider the cost of such a connector. And you should also consider the ongoing maintenance cost for the integrated solution. If you have to pay regular consulting fees to maintain an integration, then it may not be a viable option. You should obtain references and confirm seamless data interchange before committing to a third-party integration. Poorly interfaced systems create data integrity issues and islands of information. Finally, there are many situations where integration is quite common because ERP vendors often rely on integrated systems to extend their system. Commonly integrated solutions include customer relationship management systems. That's talking about CRM systems. Another common one is customer payment gateway that allows the ERP system to pull in payments from an e-commerce platform. Another example would be AP payment processors, as in when a company wishes to outsource the payment process. And we also see sales tax engines being integrated with ERP systems. And those kind of sales tax engines enable automatic update of sales tax rates and sales tax reporting. And we also do see product life cycle management systems being bolted onto the native ERP manufacturing system. Finally, a few considerations for the replacement option. When your assessment report indicates that the ERP system is a poor fit, you should avoid costly attempts to make it work. And I'm talking about doing extensive customizations, doing needless changes to your processes, or bolting on expensive add-ons. This will cost you more in the long run. There are cloud-based system alternatives out there that cost less. They're much easier to use, much more secure, and more innovative. So when you're embarking on a new system selection, you should follow a tested, methodical approach. And we've talked about the recommended system selection approach in a previous webcast. But to summarize it, the approach I would recommend would include the following steps. You should do your preliminary research on the short list of vendor options. You should define your key requirements by business processes and make sure you document this in the RFP to the vendors. You should make sure you script and score the vendor demos. You should get your TCO, total cost of ownership, right by making sure you are comparing apples to apples when you're comparing systems. And at the end of the system selection process, you should perform your due diligence checks. With that, we have come to the end of our presentation. We have described the steps in the ERP assessment process. We discussed some common types of ERP system challenges and went over a few key considerations for the solution options. We hope you found it very informative and we'll now take some questions. Tanya?
Thank you, Labi. So we've come to the end of the informational portion of our program. We did have a couple of questions come in. So we'll take that now, and while we're doing that, Labi, what I'd like to do is ask our audience to take a minute and complete a brief survey to tell us how we did. So Claire asks, we think we are using the functions of our accounting close to its capabilities. Are there tools that can be added on to an existing system to make it more automated? That one came in early, so perhaps it was covered by your integration slide there,
Yeah.
Labi.
Yes, I believe we did cover some of that. So it depends on the nature of the automation you need. If we're talking about automation in the form of procurement, which is one of the most common we see, you could leverage the native ERP tool, and if your system doesn't have it, there are lots of procurement payment service providers out there who have built great solutions that integrate with any one of the ERP systems out there. So it will depend on the specific circumstance you're in, and I'll be happy to follow up with you offline, Claire, on this, your question.
Perfect, thank you. Next question, do we have to have a full fit gap assessment to review the reporting aspect of our system, or can we just look at that area in an assessment?
Yes. As I said, the reporting challenge itself could be a direct focus of the assessment exercise. So you're really looking very closely at what is wrong with the underlying report engine. If you do have options in the vendor ecosystem, and we do see a lot of vendors who acknowledge that their systems have limitations and have vendors who are providing more of an analysis framework or more of a consolidation framework that add on to their own solution, then you want to consider this. Or if your issue is that the system itself is very old and cumbersome, and it's one of those older on-premise systems that cannot readily be integrated with, then you may want to consider a replacement.
Right. Thank you, Labi. And thank you all for joining us. If you have questions as you strive to stay abreast of your enterprise resource needs, or have questions about anything you've learned here today, please connect with Labi on social media and consider him your professional resource. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.